I've been called a loyal man for most of my life. The kind who stayed, who provided, who never gave anyone a reason to question him. At her funeral, people kept repeating it like it was something proven. He never left her side. I stood there, nodding, accepting their sympathy like it belonged to me, like I had earned it. But there was a moment, years ago, that never left me. It comes back in pieces, not all at once, just fragments. The smell of rain on concrete, a phone ringing that I chose not to answer, the sound of her voice hours later softer than I expected, like she had already forgiven something she didn't even understand yet. I told myself it didn't matter, that it was small, that marriages survive worse things. I built an entire life on top of that belief. Brick by brick, year after year, until even I almost believed it, almost. Because some nights, even now, I still wake up with the same thought pressing against my chest. She died thinking I was a man I never truly was, and the worst part is, I let her. There was a time when the silence didn't feel this heavy. Back then, it felt like peace. We were young when we got married, not reckless young, but the kind where you still believe effort is enough to make things work. She had this way of trusting me without asking questions. Not blindly, just naturally. Like it never even occurred to her that I could be anything other than what I seemed. I leaned into that version of myself early. I showed up on time. Paid the bills. Remembered small things, the way she liked her tea, the songs she hummed when she thought no one was listening. I became dependable, predictable, safe, and people noticed those things. Her friends would joke about how lucky she was. My coworkers would say I had my life figured out. Even her parents, they looked at me like I had filled some quiet checklist they never said out loud. I never corrected any of it. Because technically, it wasn't a lie. At least, that's what I told myself. There was one evening, early in our marriage, that I don't talk about. Not because I forgot it, but because it never stopped being present. It sits in the background of everything else, like a stain that only I can see. It was raining that day. I remember that clearly. Not a storm, just a steady kind of rain that makes everything feel slower. I had stayed late at work, though I didn't need to. Papers on my desk I could have finished the next morning. Calls I let stretch longer than necessary. I wasn't trying to avoid going home. That's what I convinced myself of. But I didn't leave when I could have. There was a phone call? I remember staring at it while it rang. Her name lighting up the screen. It wasn't unusual. She called me sometimes just to ask what I wanted for dinner, or to tell me something small that made her think of me. That day, I watched it ring until it stopped. I told myself I'd call back. I didn't. Instead, I sat there, longer than made sense. Listening to the rain tapping against the windows, letting the quiet stretch out around me. There was a feeling underneath it. Not guilt, not yet, just a kind of hesitation I didn't want to examine too closely. Eventually, I left the office. Not to go home. I drove in the opposite direction. It wasn't impulsive. That's the part that bothers me now. I knew exactly where I was going. Every turn felt familiar, like I had already made that drive in my mind before ever turning the key. The streetlights blurred through the rain, casting everything in this dim orange glow. I remember how steady my hands were on the steering wheel. No shaking. No second guessing. Just quiet. When I parked, I didn't sit there wondering if I should go inside. I just went. There are details from that night that feel sharper than anything else in my life. The sound of a door opening before I even knocked. The way the air inside felt warmer, heavier. The pause, brief but noticeable, before I stepped fully in. I won't pretend it meant nothing. That would be easier to say. But the truth is, at the time, I justified it in 100 small ways. Nothing dramatic. No grand reasoning. Just quiet, convenient thoughts that made it easier to keep moving forward without stopping. I told myself it wasn't really betrayal if it didn't change how I felt about my wife. I told myself it was separate, contained, something that existed outside the life we were building together. And for a while, I believed that. Hours passed differently that night. Slower, but somehow easier. Like I had stepped into a version of myself that didn't have expectations attached to it. No roles to fulfill. No one depending on me to be consistent or good or steady. Just someone else. When I finally left, the rain had stopped. The streets were quiet. Almost empty. And that's when it started to settle in. Not fully, not all at once, but enough for me to feel something shift. A weight, small at first, pressing somewhere I couldn't quite name. I got back in the car and sat there for a moment. I could have turned around. I could have undone something, or at least tried to. But I didn't. I drove home. The lights were still on when I walked in. She was sitting on the couch, half curled into the corner like she had been waiting longer than she meant to. The television was on, but muted. I could tell she hadn't really been watching it. She looked up when she heard the door. And she smiled. That's the part that stayed with me more than anything else. Not suspicion. Not questions. Just relief. "You're late," she said, but there was no edge to it. No accusation. Just a soft observation, like she was filling the silence with something gentle. I told her work ran over. The words came out easily. Too easily. She nodded like that made perfect sense. Of course it did. It always did. I had never given her a reason to doubt me before. She stood up, walked over, and kissed me like nothing in the world had shifted. And I let her. That night, lying beside her, I stared at the ceiling long after she fell asleep. Her breathing even, steady. Familiar. I remember thinking, this doesn't have to change anything. That was the thought I held on to. That I could carry both versions of myself without them ever colliding. That one mistake, if that's even what I was willing to call it back then, didn't have to define the rest of my life. So I buried it. Not dramatically. Not with some conscious decision to hide it forever. I just stopped bringing it into focus. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into years. And nothing fell apart. We built a life that looked exactly the way it was supposed to. Vacations. Holidays. Quiet routines that made people say we were solid. There were no cracks anyone else could see. Even I started to believe in that version of us. But every now and then, something small would bring it back. A smell. A street. The sound of rain tapping against the windows late at night. And I would feel it again, that same quiet weight, pressing just enough to remind me it was still there. I never told her. Not once. Even when there were moments, chances, maybe, when the truth could have come out naturally. Conversations about honesty. About trust. About how lucky we were to have something so clean compared to other couples we knew. I would listen. Agree. And stay silent. Because by then, it wasn't just about what I had done. It was about the life we had built on top of it, and breaking that felt bigger than the truth itself. So I kept choosing the same thing, over and over again, until choosing it didn't feel like a choice anymore. It just felt like who I was. Years have a way of smoothing things out, at least on the surface. If you looked at us from the outside, there was nothing to question. We settled into routines so naturally that they almost felt rehearsed. Morning tea together before work. The same grocery list every week. The same quiet evenings where she would sit with her knitting while I pretended to read, both of us comfortable in a silence that felt earned. She trusted me completely. Not loudly. Not in a way that needed to be declared. It was in the small things. The way she never checked where I had been. The way she'd hand me her phone without hesitation, asking me to reply to a message for her. The way she'd fall asleep mid-conversation sometimes, knowing I would be there when she woke up. That kind of trust, it doesn't come from words. It comes from years of never giving someone a reason to doubt you. And I made sure of that. I became even more careful. Not just about what I did, but how I was seen. I showed up earlier. Called when I said I would. Paid attention to details most people overlook. If there was ever a scale balancing who I was against what I had done, I spent decades trying to tip it back in my favor. Not for her. For me. Because the truth is, I didn't feel like a bad man. That's the part that complicates everything. I loved her. In all the ways that mattered in daily life. I listened when she spoke. I stayed when things got hard. I didn't wonder again. Not once. I made sure of that. But that one night, it didn't fade. It settled. Like something buried just deep enough that you can walk over it without seeing it, but never without knowing it's there. There were moments it came closer to the surface. Once, about 10 years into our marriage, she asked me something out of nowhere. We were driving back from visiting her sister. It was late. The roads were mostly empty, the kind of quiet that makes conversations feel heavier than usual. She turned to me and said, "Have you ever done something you knew I wouldn't forgive?" Just like that. No lead up. No context. I remember tightening my grip on the steering wheel, just slightly. Not enough for her to notice. I kept my eyes on the road, let a few seconds pass like I was thinking. And I said, "No." It wasn't hesitation she noticed. It was calm. She nodded slowly, like she had expected that answer. "I didn't think so," she said. And then she looked out the window, watching the darkness pass by like the question had already lost its importance. But it hadn't. Not for me. That moment stayed longer than it should have. Not because she suspected anything, but because she didn't. There was no test in her voice. No trap. Just a simple question asked by someone who believed she already knew the answer. And I confirmed it for her. That's when the weight changed. Before, it had been something I carried quietly. After that, it became something I actively protected. There's a difference. Protecting a lie requires attention. It shapes your behavior in ways you don't always notice at first. You become aware of what you say, how you say it, when you choose silence instead of honesty. Not in obvious ways, just enough to keep everything aligned with the version of yourself people expect. I never slipped. Not once. And over time, that became its own kind of identity. People trusted me. Not just her, everyone. Friends came to me for advice about their marriages. Coworkers confided in me about mistakes they had made, looking for reassurance or guidance. I gave it to them. I told them honesty mattered. That trust was fragile. That once you break it, you don't get to decide how or if it heals. I said those things, knowing exactly how true they were. And still, I said nothing. Years passed like that. Then decades. We grew older together in all the expected ways. Lines around her eyes that deepened when she smiled. A slower pace to everything we did. Conversations that didn't need to be finished because we already understood the ending. There was comfort in it. Real comfort. And that's what makes this harder to explain. Because what we had, it wasn't fake. It was real. Just built on something incomplete. She never stopped trusting me. If anything, it deepened with time. There's a kind of faith that comes from consistency, from years of someone being exactly who they appear to be. And I gave her that. Every single day. Except for the one that mattered most. As she got older, she started talking more about the past. Not in a nostalgic way, more like she was trying to organize her memories, make sense of the life we had lived together. She would bring up small moments I had forgotten. The first apartment we rented. The time we got lost on a road trip and ended up laughing about it for hours. The way I used to leave notes for her when I left early for work. She remembered everything. Except that night. Of course she didn't. And I never corrected her version of our story. There was one evening, near the end, that felt different. She had been quieter than usual that day. Not sick, not in pain, just reflective. Sitting by the window longer than she normally would, watching the light change as the sun went down. I sat across from her, pretending to read again. She looked at me after a while and said, "We did all right, didn't we?" It wasn't a question about success or money or anything measurable. It was about us. About the life we had built. I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "We did." She smiled, but there was something softer in it. Not doubt. Not exactly. Just depth. "I always felt safe with you," she said quietly. That mattered more than anything. That word. Safe. It stayed in the room long after she said it. Because safety, to her, meant certainty. It meant knowing who I was, without needing proof. It meant believing there were no hidden parts of me that could hurt her. And I had given her that feeling. Completely. I remember wanting to say something then. Not everything. Not the full truth. Just something. A crack in the story. But the words never came. Because even after all those years, I was still choosing the same thing. Silence. She reached for my hand, held it the way she always did, like it was something familiar, something she didn't have to think about. And I let her. Just like I always had. A few weeks later, she was gone. Quietly. Without warning. And just like that, every version of the truth I had avoided saying out loud had nowhere left to go. Except back to me. After the funeral, the house didn't feel empty right away. That's what surprised me. People came and went for days. Flowers kept arriving. Plates of food I didn't ask for filled the kitchen. There were voices in every room, soft and careful, like everyone was afraid of breaking something that had already been broken. They spoke about her like she was still just upstairs. And they spoke about me like I was something steady. He was everything to her. She never had to worry about him. Men like that are rare. I heard it all. I nodded at the right moments. Accepted the handshakes, the quiet pats on the shoulder. I even said thank you when people told me how strong I had been. Strong. That word followed me longer than the others. Because strength, in their eyes, meant I had carried our life without failing her. And I let them believe that. For a while, it was easy to stay inside that version of things. The routine of grief gave me structure. There were calls to return, papers to sign, closets to sort through slowly, like each item needed permission before being moved. Her things still smelled like her. That made it harder. Not in the way people expect, not just sadness. It was the familiarity of it. Like nothing had changed in the parts of the world she had touched, except the one part that mattered most. Her absence didn't erase anything. It made everything clearer. The silence came later. After everyone stopped visiting. After the last dish was washed and put away. After the house settled into a stillness that didn't shift no matter how long I sat in it. That's when it started. Not all at once. Just small things at first. I would sit in the living room and hear the echo of her voice in places it didn't belong. Not like a hallucination, just memory playing too loudly. The way she would call my name from another room. The soft hum she carried with her when she moved through the house. And then, the thoughts. Not new ones. The same ones that had always been there. But louder now. There was nothing left to distract from them. No version of myself to maintain. No one to protect. Just me, and the truth I had spent 43 years refusing to fully look at. I started going through her things more carefully after that. Not to organize. To remember. Drawers I hadn't opened in years. Boxes filled with old letters, photographs, small things she had kept that I didn't even realize mattered to her. She had saved everything. Even the ordinary parts of our life. Receipts from places we had gone together. Notes I had written her decades ago. Cards from birthdays I barely remembered celebrating. She had built a record of us. Complete. Unquestioned. And then, I found something I wasn't expecting. It was in a small box at the back of her closet. Tucked under things that didn't seem important at first glance. I almost missed it. Inside, there were a few folded papers. Not letters exactly. More like fragments. Thoughts she had written down without finishing them. Most of it was harmless. Lists. Reminders. Little reflections about things that had happened years ago. Until I reached one page, near the bottom. There wasn't much written on it. Just a few lines. And my name. I remember sitting down before I finished reading it. Not because I needed to. Because something in me already knew. Her handwriting was softer there. Less certain. Like she hadn't meant for anyone to ever see it. I don't know why that night still feels strange to me. That's how it started. No date. No explanation of which night. But I knew. I called him and he didn't answer. That wasn't like him. When he came home, he felt distant. Not in a way I could explain. Just enough to notice. The words blurred for a second. I had to stop. Not because I didn't understand them, but because I did. I told myself I was imagining it. He's never given me a reason to doubt him. Maybe that's why this feeling won't go away. There's nothing to hold on to. No proof. Just a moment that didn't fit the rest of our life. I remember reading that line more than once. A moment that didn't fit. She had felt it. Not the truth. Not what actually happened, but something. A shift. Small enough to question. Not strong enough to confront. I think trust is choosing to believe in someone even when something feels unclear. And I choose him. I always will. That was the last line. No anger. No accusation. Just a decision. She had noticed. For a moment. And then she buried it herself. For me. For us. I sat there for a long time after that. Longer than I could measure. Because everything I had told myself for 43 years, every justification, every quiet excuse, it all rested on one belief, that she never knew. But she did. Not fully. Not in a way that would have forced the truth into the open. But enough. Enough to feel it. Enough to question it. And still, she chose me. That's the part that broke something I didn't even realize was still intact. Because I had spent my life protecting her from a truth I thought would destroy her. When in reality, she had already protected me from it. By choosing silence. By choosing trust over doubt. By choosing to let that moment disappear so the rest of our life could remain whole. And I took that from her. I let her carry that unanswered feeling, while I carried the answer. That's what the guilt becomes, in the end. Not just what you did, but what the other person gave you in return, without knowing what they were giving. I went back to that page more times than I should have. Reading the same lines. Hearing her voice in them. Trying to find some version of it where I could still be the man everyone believed I was. But there isn't one. There's just the truth. I wasn't loyal. I was careful. I wasn't honest. I was consistent. And she loved a version of me that I allowed her to believe in. Right up until the end. There's no one left to tell now. No one who needs to hear it. No one who would be changed by it. Except me. And that's the part one didn't understand before. You don't carry something like this for decades because you're protecting someone else. You carry it because you're protecting yourself from what it would mean to finally say it out loud. I sit in this house now, the same one we built our life in, and there's no version of me left to maintain. No reason to keep the story intact. Just the truth, sitting where it always has. Unmoved. Unchanged. Waiting. And it took her being gone, truly gone, for me to finally say it, even if no one is here to hear it anymore. I betrayed her. Once. Quietly. Completely. And she died believing I never did.